We move on with our next topic. The topic is winning in social media marketing, connecting with your consumers in meaningful ways. Ms. Elizabeth Lee Ming, founder, Hello Digital Media. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all.
Yeah. So she is passionate about digital, social, and CRM, and driving thought leadership in customer centricity. With over 20 years of extensive experience in B2B and B2C marketing on both client and agency side. She has worked in South Africa, the UK, and the United States at a number of blue chip organizations. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Amazing. Thanks so much. Thanks, everybody. I'd love everyone to switch on their screen. I'd love to see everybody. I know you can all see me, but I'd certainly love to see who's on the call. And if you wouldn't mind just making me a presenter, then I'll go ahead and just share my screen so I can present. Okay, great. Thanks so much for the introduction. As I was introduced, I'm Elizabeth Lee Ming, and I am excited to be here. Great. So I would have loved to have seen all of you and all the faces of those on this call. If that's not possible, that's also okay. It just would have been lovely to see you all before you all will see me. And this is really who I am. Love you to follow me on Instagram or on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And just to let you know, I was actually born in South Africa and live in one of the top 10 most beautiful cities in the world, according to CNN, which is here in Cape Town. And it's just incredible to not only be here, but also to be able to talk about something I'm extremely passionate about, which is not only social media, but how we can use this incredible platform to create meaningful connections. And the reason why it's so important, especially now, is because actually business is human. And if you can remember back to the time where you went into a store and you were able to deal with a human being who offered you what you needed, and it was really a one-to-one experience, extremely personal. I was actually born in retail and was raised in a shop not dissimilar to this by my immigrant parents who came to South Africa. This is not my mom and dad, by the way, but this is my dad. And he, together with my mum, worked side by side in creating an incredible retail business, having really come from nothing into a country. And for me, it was really about this incredible connection that they had, and being raised in a shop allowed me to not only get very familiar and close to understanding what it means to be able to offer a personalized service to customers, but to see firsthand and witness this level of behavior and interaction. And it's led me to a career that has really spanned 20 years working for some incredible blue chip companies, most recently at Facebook, where I have been a client partner and allowed these worlds of physical and digital to converge into the space that I love so much. And this world is incredible and consistently and rapidly evolving and changing, with over almost 4.7 billion users that are now online. Of that, about 4.2 billion are on social media, and 95% of those connect via mobile, which is absolutely amazing if one thinks about just the gravity and the scale at which these number of connections are taking place as we speak. If you just were to raise your hand, sometimes it's quite nice, maybe just do it at home. But if you touched your cell phone or your mobile phone before you touched your partner this morning, you'll understand exactly what I mean and how this little device now dominates our life. And these quadrillion of connections and bytes of data that are being created at a scale and speed that has never been seen before in history makes this an incredible time for us to all be alive, because it gives us this opportunity to provide these personalized relationships and interactions that we would have had in the good old days when our parents transacted and, when my parents had a shop. that allows us for a seamless service, but allows it to now be done at scale. Even a conference like this is a great example. I'm sitting here in Cape Town in South Africa, and you all might be sitting in different places around the world. But the world is definitely changing, and what we all have been connected by is a global pandemic. And here are just some small examples of just some of the news coverage, which has really been extensive and something that has really shaken the world to its core. And I just wanted to start by sharing some key insights from the Global Web Index study that is conducted on an annual basis. And it actually is a global study that covers insights around social media and behavior. And here are some of the key insights I want to kick off with. The first one is that despite the lockdown and the spikes that we saw in usage across social channels, this has now started to stabilize in terms of those numbers, and understandably, it has remained very high within the Gen Z, and we're seeing that people are still using social media to stay connected and certainly to stay in touch. Facebook, interestingly, remains the world's most popular social network, and what we're seeing is that influencers are retaining a stronghold on consumers, but there's definitely a demand for unfiltered content. And I see that I joined in on the tail end of an interesting conversation about influencers. So yes, whilst they still have a stronghold on consumers and definitely have a place in social media and certainly in digital marketing, the need and the demand that is being driven by consumers is for much more unfiltered content. And if we look towards entertainment and inspirational content, this is absolutely key in driving profitability across social commerce, which we're now seeing becoming a lot more prevalent. If we just look at some statistics here, what you notice is that the continents that are the most involved, or agree, should I say, that social networks are still a place that is good for society. You can see that is highest amongst the Middle East and Africa and Latin America. But despite that, and obviously lowest in North America, which is understandable, and also in Europe, particularly with what's a lot of the news coverage that we see going on there. But despite that, we see that across the world, none of these exceed 50% in positive sentiment around social media. What this shows here is that amongst these different demographics, so Gen Z favoring Instagram, millennials favoring WhatsApp, Gen Xers, should I say, favoring WhatsApp, and baby boomers still favoring Facebook. What this does show is that there is still a place for social platforms, but brands and platforms need to work very, very hard towards not only addressing these issues around trust, but also around the issues being raised by social media and time spent on social media of anxiety. Interestingly, across the world, we also see that the median of time spent on social media is over 3 hours, which is a long time to be invested on a platform. But we do see that these platforms have taken this into consideration, whether it be prioritizing information around COVID, around ensuring that information is prioritized from credible sources, to removing content that is not true, right through to fact checking, for example, on TikTok. And Snapchat introduced something interesting called Here For You that allows you to obtain support, whether you're suffering from mental or emotional distress or crises, right within the Snapchat environment. Facebook has also recently launched a dedicated Facebook news section, which allows the convergence of news from credible news sources in the US and in the UK. So with brands, with social media platforms taking an active role in supporting responsible usage, in supporting enabling trust, there's never been a better time to connect, and never been a more exciting time to be alive, despite COVID and what we're going through. And the reason for that is because brands now and businesses have a phenomenal role to play in driving these connections. So much so that they can even drive social change. And that is an example that I wanted to share with you of something that took place recently right here in South Africa. I don't know if any of you heard, but there was recently, over the last couple of weeks, a very dark time here in South Africa for our history and our very young democracy. And that was when we suffered looting that took place across two of our regions, KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, and over 200 malls, over 3,000, which had about 3,000 businesses, shops, warehouses, etc., that were destroyed and damaged and ultimately looted by mobs that really were desperately unhappy for a number of reasons. And this created and resulted in long queues, people not being able to get access to food, to basic necessities, medical care, etc., where a lot of these malls unfortunately now had to be closed and access to food and resources were hugely, hugely restricted. And a woman named Imelda put out a post on Facebook, interestingly on a Facebook group called I Know a Guy, which has 84,000 members on a Facebook group. And that sparked a reaction in South Africa that saw 40,000 people reach out to join in this project or this movement to rebuild South Africa over this time and offer up their time and their help, their resources, donations of food, donations of time, to not only go in and clean up the streets and the areas that had been looted and vandalized and destroyed, but into these communities that really needed help. And this for me is an incredible example of the power that social media offers us today. Another great example, also from South Africa, is where a brand now has partnered with a non-government organization or NGO called Lifeline. Lifeline offers support to those, it's a non-profit organization, which means it offers services for free to people who need it, and they can reach out via telephone if they need help. But what we found during lockdown with COVID is that the incidence of gender-based violence actually spiked within homes, and again, brought on by many socioeconomic factors, but largely also because people were now cooped up at home. Alcohol sales were banned, but people were at home, which created a lot of issues if they were already in abusive relationships. And we saw a spike of 87,000 cases of gender-based violence in the first week of lockdown. And this was a real issue for our country. So what happened is that a company called ABI that owns a brand called Carling Black Label, which is a beer brand, as you all know, partnered with Lifeline to bring South Africans a WhatsApp line that would enable anyone that was in trouble to reach out via WhatsApp for support and help. And this WhatsApp line would then, and that conversation would then get channeled into the correct line depending on what support was needed. And this was a phenomenal initiative that was launched. It reached 7,000 people, and within the first week, over 5,000. So a really great example of how brands can leverage, again, off a social platform and come together to make an impact on a community. So what we're seeing is that there are these incredible, meaningful connections that are being created every single day through groups, across Facebook, through opportunities where you can partner with farmers, reach out to your community for help, to offer your own support if needed. And this wave is an opportunity to connect more meaningfully with consumers by understanding what it is that are the issues that are being faced, but also in other ways that would be meaningful to consumers. Another great way is through support for local businesses, again, all over the world that have suffered due to lockdown, due to loss of income, and due to major restrictions that have taken place. And South Africa is a very good example of that as well. On the Facebook platform, you were able to support small businesses and support local businesses through a number of initiatives like buying local gift cards, or what we saw is that a lot of communities, again, were coming together and setting up groups and allowing businesses to advertise offerings within their local community. And this is, would have been unheard of in the absence of something like social media to gain the level of size and scale and impact that it was able to gain. Because what is good for people is good for business. And like I said in the beginning, business is ultimately human. But you might be asking yourself, well, what does that mean? Because of this changing mindset that we're seeing amongst consumers as a result of this global pandemic, we find that people are putting the following things front of mind. Acts of care. Based on some of the examples I've already shown you, we're seeing that daily across our social platforms. People are looking for leadership, strong leadership. This is, we really are at a precipice, not only in our country here in South Africa, but we see it across many countries, all countries, in fact, that this need for strong leadership to shine, not only from our governments, but also from businesses, is becoming front and center in people's minds. And this new normal around being physically distant from each other, being in lockdown, having to stay indoors, having to stay away from others, means that we're gravitating across and onto our social platforms for more and bringing back this wave of what social really means on social platforms, like connection, like reaching out, and like sharing our lives. And these digital connections are becoming much more expansive and, again, pivotal in our lives for how we can ultimately exist and thrive. So these acts of care that we're seeing, we can now understand that people are turning concern into action. And we understand that just in the UK alone, there were 2 million that offered, across groups, over 2,000 plus offering local support. And these groups that have been set up against COVID to really mitigate against this impact. We see that 4% of German consumers say that it's important for them to feel part of a community. And these communities and groups are a way to bring back that sense of community, or Ubuntu, as we call it in South Africa. So brands can bring us closer together through the following 4 ways. The first one is based on what is now front and center in our minds. We're looking out to brands to inspire us. We're looking for brands that celebrate us, celebrate our successes, our failures, people that are picking themselves up, like that example I shared with you on Rebuild South Africa. We're looking to also be entertained. It's a lot of what we're doing on social media as well. And we're looking to be empowered. So we're looking to find ways, or to not only be inspired, but to understand what is it that we can galvanize ourselves behind an action, behind a movement. There's definitely a shift in the way things are being done, and social is bringing a lot of this about. And here are 4 ways that brands can bring us closer. But you might be asking how. It all sounds great. There's 4 ways what we can do as a brand. If you're a brand out there at the moment, I'm hoping to leave you with something tangible that you can take back into your business. So the first one, if we look at, is to inspire. And the way that we can inspire is to inspire through generosity. We can channel this generosity that we're seeing, this open-heartedness, this generosity of spirit that we are experiencing around the world and in marketing, to really form meaningful connections with customers and consumers. The other way is through expressing our values. We want brands that stand for something. We want to be inspired by brands that mean something for us and mean something in our lives, and ultimately align our values, align with our values as well, of inclusivity, of sensitivity, and ultimately of particularity. So allowing your brand to express the brand's values through stories, through creativity, through demonstrating authenticity and building trust across our platforms, through showing and demonstrating a sensitivity and inclusivity, and ultimately understanding the platform dynamics and what is happening and taking place within these communities is really key. And we're looking for leadership, looking at brands to guide us through these really, really uncertain times. And just based on a study that was done at Facebook, we see that 83% of people in Europe agree that brands should be providing us with how to deal with situations. And 71% of people actually agree that brands should show how they're responding to COVID-19 as well. And these are really key to creating transparency, to demonstrating, taking the lead, and dealing in a positive way with what almost feels insurmountable at times with this pandemic. So I wanted to share some examples of how brands could do this. And the next way is to celebrate. And a great example of celebrating who we are, or the human spirit, is this great campaign that was done by Unilever, and it was called Show Us, and they created a hashtag called #ShowUs, and it celebrated humanity in all of its beautiful forms and guises. And it was a really, really bold and brave campaign. And why I love this campaign so much is that it demonstrates inspiration by being and showing the leadership within the organization to be brave and to put themselves out there and allow themselves to be vulnerable. And by doing so, it gives people permission to do the same. So this campaign for me is a very dear to my heart campaign. So what project #ShowUs did was that it took real people. So it didn't take influencers, it didn't take models, but it took real people and used them in their campaign for Dove, showing us the real beauty in all of us, which was just amazing. So from cancer survivors through to different races, religions, creeds, ages, body positivity, tattoos. It was just an incredible campaign. It was extremely well received. And then they opened up the campaign to invite all of us, so everyone across the world, to show us that beauty, lives in all of us. And it was a really, really successful campaign. And again, demonstrating not only great leadership from the company, but also a great way to celebrate humanity and who we are. So in order to drive an impact and to really make a difference in our communities, it's important that brands demonstrate an understanding of what the human condition is. What is it that we're going through? What is the zeitgeist that is taking place at this moment? And what is this level of authenticity that we're looking for? And how can you as a brand be more authentic in your posts, in your videos, and in your content that you're creating? Another wonderful example of this is how Carlsberg again showed their support for local businesses. And what they did is you were able, again, through social media, to adopt a keg. So if you remember in the very beginning of lockdown, it was really tough, and something we're still experiencing here in South Africa as we go through a level 3 wave, where alcohol sales have actually been banned. And it means that restaurants, pubs, bars are all suffering, and many have closed down, and others have had to retrench staff. So people have lost their jobs, waiters have been out of work, restaurants haven't been able to open. This has had an incredible impact on people's psyche and on the economy here in our country. So Carlsberg, and this wasn't a campaign that wasn't only done locally, but it was actually done globally as well, where Carlsberg allowed you to support one of your favorite pubs by adopting a keg. And what it allowed you to then do was to fill up a virtual keg online in exchange for real beer when the bar was able to open. But it meant that through your purchase of a gift card or whatever it may have been, you were able to keep that pub, your favorite pub, afloat, because at least that way they could still pay their staff. And again, this campaign was really, really well received, became extremely successful, and ultimately was rolled out into other markets as well. So with the new normal, we need to innovate. This new reality is meaning that we're going to have to think a little bit more creatively and out of the box about how we do things. And people are expecting that brands need to be doing the same. So we see that 33%, again from the study that was done at Facebook, stated they were using grocery delivery services for the first time as a result of the pandemic. And 87% of people based in the UK said that businesses should be changing their activities in a significant way to help reduce the spread of coronavirus. The new normal was driving new behaviors, accelerating online, accelerating social commerce in a way that we have never seen before, and actually in ways that we were only anticipating would happen in the next 3 to 7 years, has actually taken place within the space of a few months. So brands need to innovate in order to innovate. And COVID has certainly fast-tracked this expectation that brands are able to move much more quicker, adapt with much more agility, and ultimately be much more mindful of the challenges that we are all facing. So here's a great example of how another beer brand was able to innovate, and by doing so, entertain consumers. And what they did here, they reinvented the way they communicate by launching a dive bar tour at home. It was a great campaign. It actually brought musicians into your home, so to speak, virtually and online, but allowed you to be part of a concert at home. And there were great examples where these musicians were playing at home. I've heard of great examples where even on Zoom calls, people show each other their homes and do virtual tours of their homes. We had a musician right here in our neighborhood, a very well-known South African musician, actually played on his roof, and that was filmed and then broadcast all over the world, which was amazing. So really innovative, interesting ways to entertain through concerts and through ways that we would have normally happily gone to a concert to enjoy with hundreds or thousands of people. We're now being able to connect virtually in order to do that. And then the last way that we can look to brands, or the way that brands can ultimately create meaning, is to empower. And this is a great example of what Red Bull did, where they allowed this level of empowerment by partnering again with Wings for Life community to run their own awareness and fundraiser campaign, and provided them with an easy to implement creative tool and activation that ultimately allowed you to participate again in this world run, which is quite fun. So what you can see here was how they did it through stories. I'll just show you now. What it looked like in the news feed. And then ultimately how they go through action stories. So this event was celebrated simultaneously in 24 locations across the globe via Facebook Live, and ultimately resulted in almost 84% decrease in ad spend, a 17% increase in participation, and a 20% increase in donations from 2018. So all in all, hugely successful and a great way to not only empower people to participate, but also share their participation and raise and increase their donations. And they extended it through stickers that you were able to then show your support for this event. Through stories frames that you could ultimately add. And then lastly, through the participation pages. All of these were a great way for you to participate in the campaign and show your support and let others know how you are supporting these campaigns. And it's a great initiative. So to end off, I thought I would share just a wrap up of everything I have spoken about in my 30 minutes with you today. And here are some key takeaways to winning social media in order to create meaningful connections with your consumers. The first one is make sure you inspire your community with actions and messages of generosity, compassion. Allow impact by giving people a sense of direction when they need it most. Innovate your marketing solutions with purpose and people in mind. And I really want to invite you to really push the envelope on innovation. If there's ever been a time to experiment, to test and learn, to really allow your business or your brand to be vulnerable, it would be now. And ultimately to optimize these digital experiences through your consumers, making them part of the journey, empowering them and enabling participation. Because being good for people, is good for business. And we know that good for business allows for business growth. Thank you so much for having me in this conference. It's been lovely to share my thoughts with you. And if you'd like to stay in touch, then please feel free to do so across Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for a beautiful insight about how we can get close to consumers on a social media platform. And, stories in South Africa and all carried us a lot, starting from your personal life. So thank you very much. And
thank you so much for having me. Bye, everyone.